criteria is too narrow and limits the opportunities for regional airports.
Rebecca Bailey-Long.
Long Bailey, Sir David. Well, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Sir David, especially since this is my first speaking role as Shadow Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. And I look forward to working with the Right Honourable Member for South West Hertfordshire on this occasion, and no doubt we'll be sparring together on further occasions. I'd like to offer my thanks and congratulations to the Honourable Member for Solihull for securing this important debate today on a topic that's not only of concern to me as Shadow Exchequer Secretary, but also because my own constituency of Salford and Eccles will be affected by this. I'd also like to thank the honourable members who've taken part in the debate today. We heard from the Honourable Member for Central Ayrshire, who gave a passionate account of the impact that air passenger duty has on her local airport of Prestwick. We heard from the Honourable Member for Fylde, who talked about the plight of Blackpool Airport, especially in light of the fact that it was closed not so long ago and it's struggling to get back on its feet now. We heard from the Honourable Member for Blakely and Broughton, who quite rightly questioned the future viability of APD generally. The Honourable Member for Strangford made some very important points about the issues that Belfast has suffered in regards to its competition with Dublin Airport. The Honourable Member for Meriden highlighted, again quite rightly, that the time for the debate is now. It's an important issue and we need to get a grip on it quickly. The Honourable Member for South Antrim made some fantastic points again about the issue in Northern Ireland, and we had fantastic contributions from the Honourable Members of Kilmarnock and Loudon, and the Honourable Member for Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey. Now, the issue of air passenger duty is being highlighted by proposals contained within the Smith Commission's recommendations. Now, I want to start by reiterating our support for the implementation of the Smith Commission's recommendations as enacted by the Scotland Bill 2015-16. Inevitably, this has consequences, but that should not undermine the principle of devolution for Scotland and indeed Wales and Northern Ireland. That being said, we can't escape the fact that the Scottish Government's anticipated reduction in air passenger duty by 50% in the next 5 years and its intention to abolish it altogether when finances allow is predicted to have a significant effect on regional airports in England, especially those close to the border. Now, indeed, HMRC research conducted in 2012 suggested that Newcastle Airport would see a 10% reduction in passengers in the short term, and Manchester, the closest airport to my constituency, would lose almost 5%. My honourable friend for Blakely and Broughton, which neighbours my own constituency, cited evidence in an earlier debate on this issue that if one EasyJet flight and one Ryanair flight were moved from Manchester to Glasgow, the Treasury would lose 2.9 million and 450 jobs would be lost in Manchester. Now that, of course, is a forecast, but we can already see the effects of variable rates of air passenger duty by examining the situations in Northern Ireland. Belfast International has suggested that they lose between 570,000 and 1.5 million passengers a year to Dublin Airport, where no APD is levied at all. Dublin Airport has run a marketing campaign specifically targeting at attracting Northern Ireland passengers, and in 2013 the number of passengers from Northern Ireland using Dublin Airport increased by 12%. With the possibility of powers to determine APD rates being devolved to Wales in due course, this issue is set to impact not just the airports of the north of England, but also those in the southwest. Yes, I will give way.
Mr. Edwards. For giving way. As she's mentioned, my beloved homeland. Can she therefore confirm that it is the policy now?
Order, sorry. The honourable lady should sit down when the...
Oh, sorry.
Order. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you very much, Sir David. Can she confirm, therefore, now that it is actually the policy of the Labour Party to support the devolution of APD to Wales? Because when we've had finance bills, I appreciate before the Honourable Lady was elected to this House, the Labour Party has abstained on those votes during finance bills. So I'll be very grateful for that clarification, because it's quite a shift in policy on behalf of the party.
I'll get it right this time. Rebecca Long-Bailey.
I thank the honourable member for his comments, and I'll come on to the party's position in due course. Now, with the possibility of powers to determine APD, as I've mentioned, being devolved to Wales in due course, this issue is set to impact not just on airports in the north of England, but also those in the southwest. Now, York Aviation has predicted that if Cardiff Airport is no longer subject to air passenger duty, Bristol Airport will lose 440,000 passengers, up to 33 routes, 1,500 jobs and over 800 million from the local GDP. This concern has been cemented by Ryanair's commercial chief, warning that the company could double its profits per passenger by flying from Cardiff instead, should their APD rates be set to zero. Thus, it's clear that the devolution of powers to set air passenger duty will have a profound effect on England's regional airports. So I am glad that the Conservatives heeded the advice of my colleagues, the then Shadow Chancellor, the Honourable Member for Streatham and the Honourable Member for Barnsley East, when they wrote to the Government in September of last year, calling for the Treasury to start working on a mechanism for ensuring English regional airports are not disadvantaged by devolution to Scotland or anywhere else. I therefore welcome the Government's publication of a discussion paper outlining 3 possible options for tackling the issues of our regional airports. I have a few specific concerns regarding this consultation, which I'm sure the Minister will be able to put at ease. But firstly, I'd like to ask the Minister for an update on the progress of this consultation as a whole. It's my understanding that the closing date for submissions was the 8th of September, but as of yet there has been no published evidence or conclusions from the Government. Can the Minister confirm when the Government's response to this consultation will be published? More specifically, one solution discussed in the paper is to devolve powers to set rates of air passenger duty to local or combined authorities, either partially or fully. Now, this seems to have implications for our compliance with EU state aid rules. I note for the record, Sir David, that we on this side support reform of the EU state aid rules, which would be a much better subject for renegotiation than those chosen by the Prime Minister, but nonetheless, it is the current rules that will apply. One particular issue is that the Government cannot vary national tax rates in a way that is more favourable to specific regions, and for that reason, funding for the relevant local authority would be reduced by the full value of air passenger duty receipts in that area. Now, HMR research indicates that full devolution to a local authority containing one medium-sized airport would require a staggering reduction in funding of £45 million a year. The point of devolving powers is to allow regional airports to avoid undercutting from rivals. But can the Minister confirm that under this option, a local authority that did so would receive no extra funding from central government and would have to deal with a cut of £45 million? He will understand our concern that even the devolution package that the Chancellor proposes will not contain much in the way of revenue-raising powers, nor anything like the scope that the devolved administrations have to make savings elsewhere. Now, further to this, if local authorities are able to set their own levels of APD, does he share concerns with me that this will kickstart a race to the bottom, which, taken to its logical conclusion, would result in an overall loss to the Treasury of £3.2 billion? Finally, the third option... I will give way.
Mr. Brown. Thank you for giving way. You mentioned there the race to the bottom and that, different regional airports cut APD then by a net decrease. Is that not a run contrary to the argument that everybody's been making all day, that actually cutting APD increases passenger numbers, increases jobs, increases taxes? So, therefore, does the Honourable Member agree that our argument could be flawed there?
Rebecca Long-Bailey.
I thank my honourable friend for making that intervention, and he raises an important point, and hopefully when the Minister has time to respond on the progress of the report itself, he'll be able to shed some light on those issues specifically. Now, in terms of the third option outlined in the discussion paper, it's to provide aid to regional airports who will be particularly affected by the devolution of APD. However, I'm particularly concerned that this would do very little to neutralise the effects at airports which feel the impact most. Airports like Manchester and Newcastle would be too large to be eligible for such aid under the proposal, and therefore this measure would be ineffective in tackling the issue where it will have the biggest impact. Furthermore, providing direct aid has an obvious fiscal implication for the Exchequer, so it would be helpful to clarify whether this would be provided by the Treasury or, again, would it involve corresponding cuts to the local authority funding. Now, finally, it would be helpful if the Minister could also touch on the environmental implications of air passenger duty generally. I've had a number of queries regarding that from my own constituents particularly. Now, aviation is, of course, covered by the EU emissions trading scheme, and we anticipate that the fifth carbon budget will address the sector later this year, but it would be helpful to outline how the proposals under consideration would interact with our obligation to decarbonise, especially if we are moving towards little or no air passenger duty, and how a devolved settlement would work alongside nationally set targets. So in conclusion, Sir David, there is a degree of consensus that this issue must be addressed urgently, and we welcome both the Government's consultation and today's debate. There are a number of areas which we would welcome further clarification, and I look forward to hearing the Minister's response.
Minister.